To reflect on the topic today, that the Bible built modern India, and only the Bible is the force that can make India a great nation. That's the theme, that the Bible can make India a great nation, and each one of you can play a significant role in that process. That's what we want to discuss. The government is pushing, or some forces are pushing, that India should change its national anthem from Janaganamana Adhinayak Jai Ho, which Rabindranath Tagore wrote in 1911, to Vande Mataram, which Bankim Chandra Chatterjee wrote in 1880. In 1882, he published his novel Anandmat, in which the song Vande Mataram was included, and it was that novel which popularized the song. Now, most of the people who are saying that Vande Mataram should become the national anthem, they don't know enough about Bankim Chandra Chatterjee or his novel. That is because since independence, his last chapter of one Anand Mat has been removed from all Indian editions of the book, the novel Anand Mat. But that chapter is still in print in Oxford edition, and you can easily get the last chapter of, because it was there in all the earlier versions of Anand Mat. The novel is about Hindu sannyasis fighting against Muslims. And these sannyasis have a supernatural heavenly guide who is guiding them how to fight and how to win. After they have defeated the Muslims, the sannyasis want to start fighting against the British. This is 1882. So 1857, that has been great revolt against the British East India Company. Now the British Crown is ruling, 1882, and the sannyasis in the novel, of course, novel is actually set 100 years earlier in a great famine in Bengal. So it is written and published in 1882, but the story is imaginary story from 1770s. So the sannyasis want to fight against the East India Company of British rule, and their heavenly guide appears and says to them, "No, don't fight the British, because God has brought the British here to teach us things that we don't know. We don't know science, we don't know technology, we don't know freedom, we don't know justice, we don't know law, we don't know governance, we don't have any educational system, etc. So God has brought, this is Bankim Chandra Chatterjee in Anand Mat, in the last chapter, which all of the Indian editions today remove. He's saying that God brought the British here to transform India. And once we have learned the right things that we need to learn, God will take them away. We don't need to fight. That's the conclusion of Anand Mat novel, which most people who are pushing that Vande Mataram should become our national anthem, they don't know about it. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee was a deputy collector in the British East India Company. No, but by that time, East India Company was gone, a British crown. So he is a civil servant under the British. He knows the British rule in India. And he is saying that this is what God has done to bless India. And therefore, we should not fight, because once we have learned the things we need to learn, they will go. Now, he's not saying anything unique. At the same time, a little before him, here in Maharashtra, Jyotiba Phule is saying exactly the same thing. If you read Jyotiba Phule's book, Gulamgiri, Slavery, which the government of Maharashtra has published, in his book Gulamgiri, Jyotiba Phule, the first low caste social reformer, he's saying that real slavery is what our religious system has imposed. 10%, 15% of the people have imposed upon 85% of India. They've kept us enslaved. And the British rule is the first time our oppressed people are finding liberty. This is what Jyotiba Phule says in the book Gulamgiri, published by Maharashtra government in recent decades. This is very important for us to remember, because as our history is being corrupted, we're not told that 1857 revolt against the British rule was a massive success in the first few days of the revolt. It began in Meerut with Mangal Pandey firing the first shot, and then they killed the British officers in Meerut, marched to Delhi, liberated Delhi. Delhi was still a Mughal empire, but there was a very heavy British presence in Delhi. These revolutionaries or rebels, who they killed all the Englishmen, took control of Delhi, and they made the last of the Mughal emperor the emperor, Shahanshah of India. So, and then the revolt, of course, began. You have heard of Jhansi Ki Rani, you have heard of Tantia Tope, and other people who joined the. It began as a military revolt, but it expanded to include several of the rulers who began to fight against the British. Why did they lose? Why did Indian revolutionaries lose? This is not, we're not told. But they lost because Bombay Presidency, Madras Presidency, the Sikhs, they all supported the British. Majority of the Indian soldiers in the British army, they supported the British rule. The Punjabi Sikhs are very important because Punjab had been colonized just 9 years earlier in 1648. The Punjab had been colonized, but it was the Sikhs who laid down their lives to take Delhi back, to end the Mughal Empire and give it to the British Crown. So the East India Company ended and the Mughal Empire ended, and formally India became a colony of the British Crown in 1858. So vast majority of Indians, they felt at that time, this is before Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, they felt that the British rule was better for us than the Mughal rule. We don't want the Mughal rule. Next to the Mughals, the most powerful force in India was the Marathas. There were 3 wars that began between the British in India and the Marathas. And the British won each of those 3 wars. Although the Marathas were probably stronger than the Mughals, because most of the Hindus supported the British compared to the Marathas. And in each of those 3 wars, if you Google it and check it out, in each of those wars against the Marathas, Marathas themselves revolted against their rulers and supported the British. You just go to ChatGPT, go to Google, and search who financed the East India Company war against the revolutionaries. it was Hindu Seths, Jagat Seths, the bankers, who were financing the British rule uh, to fight against uh, the the rebels. So Jhansi Ki Rani is very famous in all our history books, and I studied in Jhansi. But it was the Scindia family in Gwalior which supported the British, because of which Jhansi Ki Rani died. So why did the Gwalior Scindia family support the British? Today we call them traitors. In their own time, including 30 years later in Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's time, they saw that what was happening during the British rule, not because of the British, but because of the Bible, because of the gospel, this was a blessing to India. So it's not just Chatterjee, it's not just Jyotiba Phule. It is the Holkar Maharaj, Holkar family in Indore, and Scindia family in Gwalior, but most of the majority of the Indian kings, Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs, they saw that God was doing something in India. One of the things God was doing was bringing a spirit of nationalism into India. This was one of the things that the Bible was bringing. Vande Mataram is written in 1882. Why don't you find a hymn in the Vedas or Upanishads or Ramayana or Mahabharata in the epics? Why don't you make that a national anthem? Well, the reason is that there is no concept of nation, there is no concept of nationalism in India. Indian nationalism begins as Bengali nationalism with the poetry of Michael Madhusudan Dutt, a Brahmin convert, who is a great scholar, great linguist. He wrote in Latin, wrote in English, wrote in many languages. His hero was John Milton. John Milton was Secretary of Latin under Cromwell, Puritan government. And then he was inspired to begin to write his poetry, epics such as Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, etc., in English. So Michael Madhusudan Dutt realized that if I really want to bless Bengal, at that time the concept of India as a nation didn't exist. If I want to bless Bengal, I should write poetry in Bengali. So Bengali were a number of dialects. Bible translators such as William Carey collected these dialects to create literary Bengali, which Michael Madhusudan Dutt begins to use. So he begins for the first time the concept of nation, Bengali nation, and Bengali nationalism, which grows into Indian nationalism because people like William Carey are already talking about India. The vision of India is not an Indian idea. So, you know, in September 2023, the government was trying to change the constitution to change the name India. They couldn't actually bring a bill forward to change the name because they didn't have enough votes to change the constitution. And then they realized that any attempt to change the constitution will turn the Ambedkarites, Dalit, Bahujan, against the ruling party. So they dropped the idea. The issue was debated many times. So Pandit Nehru was, if you don't know it, Nehruji had become the Prime Minister of India in 1937, 10 years before independence, because 1935 India Act led to the first election, 1937, in which Nehruji became the Prime Minister of India before independence, 10 years before independence. In 41, 39, the World War II began. 1941, Mahatma Gandhi called for Quit India movement in Congress uh, uh, annual convention here in Mumbai. The next morning, all the Congress leaders were arrested, and Nehruji was in Ahmednagar jail from about 1941 August to 41 to 45. That's when he wrote his book, The Discovery of India. Why not Discovery of Bharat? Because no nation called Bharat had ever existed. No nation called Bharatvarsh had ever existed. There is a lot of talk today that it is the Mughal colonialism and British colonialism, Mughal imperialism, British colonialism, which divided, fragmented India. The truth is the opposite. How did Delhi become the capital of Muslim rule in India? That happened in 1192. You won't remember these dates, but it's being filmed, so you can watch it the second time. 1192, Muhammad Ghani came several times invading India. In 91, he reached up to Delhi, which is 500 kilometers or so from Khyber Pass. There was nobody stopping him. He came. Prithviraj Chauhan, who was ruling Delhi, was a brave warrior. He defeated Muhammad Ghani, so he went back. He came back in 92 because the king of Kannauj was a bigger kingdom than Delhi. Now it's a small town in UP, but relatively. But back then, Kannauj was bigger than Delhi. Jayachand invited Muhammad Ghani to come back. Now, Jayachand and Prithviraj were first cousins. Their mothers were sisters. Jayachand had tried to organize an Ashwamedh Yagya, the horse sacrifice, which is extending the territory of the kingdom of Kannauj. So Kannauj was a small kingdom, Delhi was a smaller kingdom. There was no Bharatvarsh. So Jayachand invites Gauri to kill Prithviraj Chauhan. He was hoping that Gauri will come kill Prithviraj, he will loot Delhi, he will go away, and Jayachand will become the ruler, the king of Delhi. But of course, Gauri had different ideas. He not only killed Prithviraj, he went on to kill Jayachand as well. And then Delhi became the capital of the Muslim rules, various dynasties, until 1858, after the Great Revolt, which the British called mutiny, but it was much more than mutiny. But that's what ended the Mughal Empire. But the idea of nation was never there in India. The value called nationalism was never there. Nationalism is a good value. It's a virtue because nationalism transcends casteism, as you sang in the last song. Indians saw themselves as, I'm higher caste than you and you're higher caste than her. You can't marry her, and he is not allowed to touch the water and the food, etc., etc. So casteism was dividing us. Nationalism is supposed to unite all the castes, all the tribes, all the people, that it's not my ethnicity, tribalism, casteism, but we are all united under one nation. So this idea of nation, this idea of nationalism came from the Bible. I won't go into the details because you have the book, or you will get the book of, it is English poetry, Wordsworth, Tennyson, William Blake, Longfellow. As Indians are studying English language, they are able to rise above casteism and tribalism and begin to think of ourselves as a nation. Because Israel was never one people group. Israel was 13 tribes because Joseph had become two tribes. 13 tribes, 13 ethnic groups living together in one territory under one law, governing themselves. That's what makes a great nation. Many people groups, many ethnicities living together under one law, governing themselves. That is a great nation. When tribalism takes over after Solomon, during Rehoboam, two tribes become Judah, 10 tribes become Israel, and they're fighting each other. So when Israel splits into two nations, there's not one nation, but two nations, because there are two governing structures, two geographies. So the Israel was never one tribe or one ethnicity. It was one nation composed of 13 tribes being governed by the common law. That's what the Lord Macaulay gives us with Indian Penal Code later, which grows into the Indian Constitution, which we may or may not have the time to talk today. But the point that I'm making so far is the reason some people want us to sing Vande Mataram as our national anthem. They can't find a poem in Vedas or Upanishads and Puranas and epics because there was no concept of nation. There was no value called nationalism in India. This came from the Bible. The details are in the book that the pastor has recommended, and the passages, Psalm 102, 137, etc., Daniel, Nehemiah, Esther, who not just talked about nationalism, but risked their lives to rebuild their nation. That value came from the Bible. That's why there is no nationalist poetry. There is no concept of Indian geography. I've explained in the book why the name India came from the Bible. Columbus set out from Spain looking for sea route to India. He never got to India. Vasco da Gama started from Portugal 2 years later. He did succeed in coming to Cochin, but he found that nobody in Cochin called himself an Indian. There was no concept of India. Nobody called himself a Malayali because there was no Malayalam language. Malayalam came later out of Tamil and local dialects. So there was no concept of Kerala, there was no concept of Malayalam, there was no concept of nation when Vasco da Gama came here. We do have a Gama here, my friend Darshan, who was explaining to me. So I'm referring it to honor him. But the concept of India came from the book of Esther. The name India came from the book of Esther. At the time of independence, the name that was most popular was Hindustan. That was 1904, Sir Muhammad Iqbal wrote the song, सारे जहां से अच्छा है हिंदुस्तान हमारा हम बुलबुलें हैं इसके ये गुलसिता हमारा. That was the nationalist song that drove the freedom struggle. Out of that came slogans such as Jai Hind, which Gandhiji will use, Nehru will use, Patel will use, Jai Hind. But you couldn't call India Hindustan after independence because that was a Persian name. And all of this is in the book, so I won't go into the details now. But to make the point that you have Michael Madhusudan Dutt, you have Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, you have Iqbal, and then you have Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore's song became our national anthem, Jan Gan Man Adhinayak Jai Hai, because for the first time in history, Tagore is the one who defines Indian territory. Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravida, Utkal, Banga, Vindhya, Himachal, Yamuna, Ganga, etc. You won't find a discussion, a description of India's geography in any Vedas, in any Upanishad, in Mahabharata, Ramayana, nowhere. Bharat is there, Ram's brother, who is ruling over Ayodhya. But Ayodhya is a tiny kingdom. When Ramchandraji comes back and becomes the king of Ayodhya, he starts Ashwamedh Yagya, the horse sacrifice, to extend the borders of Ayodhya. So his own sons, who don't know this is our father, Ramchandraji, they oppose his horse from, you know, the story of Love and Kush, opposing Ashwamedh Yagya. And Hanuman, who knows what's going on, is silent, although he could have beaten them. But the point is simply is that Ayodhya, over which Bharat ruled, was a tiny little kingdom. There was no Bharatvarsh over which Bharat was ruling. There was no Bharatvarsh over which Prithviraj Chauhan was ruling. He was ruling in Delhi, a tiny kingdom smaller than Kannauj. These are historical facts, but facts don't matter. The problem with Jan Gan Man Adhinayak Jai Hai, just a little bit about it, is that it begins with Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravida, Utkal, Banga. It leaves Kashmir out. Why does he leave Kashmir out? Because British defeated Sikhs who were ruling Kashmir, won Kashmir, but they couldn't manage Kashmir from Calcutta. There were no airlines, there were no roads, there were no bridges. They couldn't administer Kashmir. So they sold it to a Hindu governor of Jammu who was working under the Sikhs and had collected a lot of money, Karan Singh's grandfather. So the British sold it to him because we can't manage it from Calcutta. So Tagore's geography of India came from the British Stamp Act of 1899. British Parliament passed the Stamp Act, which specifically excluded Kashmir from the Indian geography of British India because they had already sold Kashmir. So the part of reaction against Tagore's song, Janagan Man Adhinayak, is that his geography of India is defined by British Parliament because there was no description of Indian geography. There was no sense of history in India. There was no sense of geography in India. Today, the Hindi word itihas, which many of the Indian languages have, itihas is equal to the English word history. Now, actually, in Indian tradition, the word itihas meant epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, etc. Epics, which were mythologies, stories, they were called history, itihas. So there's no concept of history as a quest for truth. And once again, myths are being spread in India in the name of history. But if it was genuine nationalism, which people were really interested in, nationalism would unite all Indians. But they are actually dividing India, including through anti-corruption and anti-conversion laws. That you are second-class citizen, third-class citizen, we don't really want you here. If you worship, if you study the Bible, we will beat you, kill you, whatever, whatever. So this is divisive ideas This is not nationalism. Nationalism would be love and acceptance. Now, since we happen to have Dr. Babu Varghese here, I might mention in his honor his book, The Let There Be India, which shows that all of the modern Indian vernaculars are created by or crafted by Bible translators. In case you don't know, Hindi is one of the last languages that the Bible translators produced. Dialects existed, but Hindi didn't exist. The first Hindi writer is Bhartendu Harishchandra. If you've studied your 7th, 9th grade Hindi, you know that the first Hindi writer is Bhartendu Harishchandra. Bhartendu Harishchandra is 11 years younger than Samuel Kellogg, who wrote the Hindi grammar. So the language that Bhartendu Harishchandra is using, that we call Hindi today, the Hindi of All India Radio and Bollywood, this Hindi is coming out of the Bible translators. And this Hindi, only in 1880s, this is created because Urdu is the language of all of North India. So first John Gilchrist created Hindustani in Calcutta, but when he created Hindustani, there was no printing. So nobody was printing Hindustani. There were no schools teaching Hindustani. So Hindustani was no one's language. Martin Luther, Cambridge scholar, he was in Kanpur. He created modern literary Urdu through the Bible translation around 1905 or 6, it could be 4, out of Kanpur, because his mission was to teach the Bible. I mean, his excuse was to teach the Bible to Indian women who had been taken by English soldiers, English traders. So they had Anglo-Indian children. Their mother tongue was not English because their mothers didn't know English. So Henry Martin created Urdu. By that time, printing had come, and by that time, schooling system had begun. So Urdu began to be taught. So Urdu became the language of whole of North India, including Punjab and Pakistan, what is Pakistan now. That is when, in the 1870s, 1880s, the Pandits got concerned that everybody is speaking Urdu, which is leaning towards Persian and Arabic. We want a language, Hindi, which is leaning towards Sanskrit and Indian, Indian languages, vernaculars. Therefore, they urged Bible translators to create Hindi. That's how Hindi was born. So, but if you listen to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, listen to those people from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, they're speaking Urdu or Hindustani. They're not speaking Hindi. So, why is this significant? This is significant, as I put on my Facebook today, is Jews are 14 million people in the whole world. In Israel, there are about 7, 8 million, and the rest is scattered, but total 14 million people. And they have won 220 Nobel Prizes, 14 million people. We are 1.4 billion. We are 100 times more than the Jews. And total Nobel Prizes we have won is 9. So they won 220, 100th of us. And we have won only 9. Why is this?
Because they read the Torah.
We can do a lot of sociological study, and you should do research. But one simple point is Israel was able to revive their national language, Hebrew. So everybody in Israel speaks Hebrew. We had a very sophisticated language, Sanskrit. But Sanskrit never became the mother tongue of Brahmin boys because learned Pandits never taught Sanskrit to their wives. If the mother doesn't know Sanskrit, how can children have Sanskrit as their mother tongue? So far from Sanskrit becoming national language, it couldn't even become the mother tongue of Brahmin boys and girls, let alone all the non-Brahmins. Their languages, the Pandits had no interest. In the early Hindi literature, for example, there is not a single Brahmin. Bhartendu Harishchandra, Premchand, Mahadevi Verma, any of the early Hindi writers, there is no Brahmin. Because they look down upon Hindi. Likewise, Muslims, Imams, Maulvis, they look down upon Urdu because Urdu was corruption of Arabic and Persian from their point of view. They are purists, they love Arabic, they love Persian. But the missionaries are translating Indian languages, creating Indian languages, creating Bible, and I'll come back to that hopefully, because if the dialects, mother tongues of children become literary languages, then a child can study in his own language all the way up to PhD. You can write a PhD thesis in Marathi. And you don't have to study Latin, you don't have to study Sanskrit for your intellectual development. So creating these languages is unleashing the potential of every individual. Now, most theologians won't tell you that the Reformation was a linguistic revolution. Wycliffe translates the Bible into English. Martin Luther translates the New Testament and then the Bible into German. Tyndale translates the Bible into English. That becomes the first English Bible to be printed. All of European languages are created by Bible translators. That's what William Carey begins to do here. And then a whole movement emerges, which is continuing today, to turn every major dialect into a literary language to develop the nations. So Reformation was a linguistic revolution which came to India with William Carey, and we have a book right here, Father of Modern India, William Carey. Reformation was a not only linguistic revolution, it was an educational revolution. Martin Luther, the first reformer, he realized that one difference between Old Testament and New Testament is that in the Old Testament, if you want to be priest, you have to be born into a Levite tribe. If you want to be king, you have to be born into tribe of Judah, preferably in the house of David. But in the New Testament, we were all slaves of Satan, purchased by the blood of Christ to be made sons of God, and sonship means kingship. If your father is king, you are a king, you are a prince, you are a princess. So the New Testament is every believer a priest and king. But Luther realized that if God's will is to be done on earth, you can't do God's will on earth if you don't know God, if you don't know His will. If you don't study His word, you can't know God's will. So to transform, to create, to bring Europe out of the Middle Ages, Dark Ages into the modern world, every child has to be educated so they might study God's word and know God's will, to do God's will on earth. This is why Reformation was a linguistic revolution, a educational revolution, because it was intended to become a political revolution, an economic revolution. So you have a lot of people um, today who are saying India is poor because of British colonialism. We were very wealthy once, and the British looted us, and they became rich, we became poor. Well, India was British colony, so was the USA, so was New Zealand. New Zealand, even today, the king of Britain is the king of New Zealand, even today. So New Zealand was British colony. Per capita income in New Zealand is something like $49,000-$50,000 per capita GDP. Per capita GDP in India is less than 3,000. Both were British colonies. But in New Zealand, they accepted Protestant ethic, the Bible, work ethic, economic ideas, political ideas. So New Zealand developed, we remain stagnant and backward. One can go on comparing, but this is not the time to do that. The point is to attack the British, which a lot of our universities are doing, the post-colonial literature is doing. America was also British colony, but where is it? Australia was also British colony. If you learn the good things from Britain, which is what Bankim Chandra Chatterjee is saying in Anand Math, you will develop. Because this is the book that transformed nations that were in dark ages to unleash everyone's energy, everyone's potential, and create the modern world. That's what the Bible has actually done in India. And that's what the Bible needs to do for future. So I mentioned that with respect to Dr. Babu Varghese, that the Bible translators created all of modern Indian languages. But what most church historians don't tell you is that the Bibles that were printed in Sirampur Mission Press, the Baptist Mission Press in Sirampur, most of them were actually translated in Calcutta. Not all. Henry Martin was in Kanpur, so there were other centers of translation, but most of the Bibles were translated in Fort William College, which was a college for civil servants, because East India Company had hired pandits. Over the pandits were missionaries. Pandits were teaching languages, so they are teaching Marathi. But Marathi doesn't, it has poetry, but it has no prose, it has no literature. So the Bible is being translated into Marathi so that young men who are coming from England, 21, 22, 23 years old, who were going to become district collectors, deputy collectors, magistrates, they will read the Marathi Bible to learn Marathi. They already know English Bible, they can read English Bible, they'll also learn Marathi Bible. So they will be able to administer justice in Maharashtra. Marathi, at that time there is no Maharashtra, but Marathi speaking regions. Bible will teach them not just Marathi, but Bible will teach them how does God want India to be governed. So the Bible is creating, thank you, the Bible is creating civil servants of India. Most church historians won't tell you that Sirampur is William Carey's base, but 3 days a week he is in Calcutta in Fort William College where civil servants are being trained. The evangelical conscience, the evangelical mind is training the civil servants for India. Because under the impact of American theology, which I was saying earlier, is waiting for tribulation, waiting for rapture, waiting for second coming. We have no interest in governing India because Paul says in 2 Timothy 3 that in the last days the world has to go from bad to worse. Our Bible teachers, particularly coming from America, they don't even know what the phrase last days means. R.C. Sproul has a book called The Last Days According to Jesus, where he meticulously studies every time the phrase is used in the New Testament to show that last days according to Jesus is not 2026. The last days according to Jesus is the last days of the Jewish nation of the Jewish age, which ends in AD 70. Now, I'm not a preterist, but this is a careful, and not a R.C. Sproul a preterist, but it's a systematic study of what does the phrase last days mean. But we have a mindset that, oh, we are living in the last days. India has to go from bad to worse. The world has to go from bad to worse. Because this is what Paul says in 2 Timothy 3. The basic problem is that some ideas have so brainwashed us that we can't even read the Bible correctly. The mindset, as I move towards the end of the presentation, the mindset today is that we are the body of Christ, but we are the useless body of Christ. His useful body is sitting comfortably in heaven. And until that body comes down, the world will go from bad to worse. This is our outlook. My heart is Christ's throne, because I accepted Him as my Lord and Savior. But my heart is the useless throne of Christ. Therefore, we have to build a third temple in Jerusalem, build a throne for Him, because the temple that He is building in Mumbai is a useless temple. The temple has to be built in Jerusalem, and the throne has to be built in Jerusalem, and Jesus will come and sit there, and then His will be done on earth. This is the last 100 years. This is what the theological, eschatological perspective that has been given to us, that we aren't able to think outside of it. We aren't able to study the Bible independently. Yes, the gospel changed England. Britain and Europe was so terrible, they were much worse than Bajrang Dal and Shiv Sena. They burnt Bibles. The bishop, Tansal, he burnt Tyndale's New Testament in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. They not only burnt Bibles, they captured the Bible translation, strangled him, and burned him alive. This was Europe. And this Europe was transformed by this book. Oh, but we are living in the last days. In these days, this book cannot transform India. That's our problem. Pessimism, escapism. That's our problem. And this has got to be challenged on the basis of strict exegesis and faithful exegesis, which we won't do today. The question is, okay, the Bible created modern India. Can the Bible make India a great nation? My proposal is very simple. We have a book here, The Third Education Revolution. The proposal is that we marry church and technology to bring godly education into India. And this is something we can begin in the next 3-4 months. A hall like this, or smaller than this, a church, your church, should offer a online BA or MA in nation building. This course will cover everything that UPSC curriculum requires. So your young people will get a BA or an MA, but in the process, they will study everything that the UPSC curriculum requires. So if we get 50 centers like this, and the Union Biblical Seminary in Pune is one, many other places are saying, yes, we want to do that. So just 20 students in your church taking a course, BA or MA in nation building. These 1,000 students who are studying, so 50 centers with 20 students each, 1,000 students, there will be competitions, tests every month. You don't have to hire experts. The curriculum will come online. Students will study. They will compete with each other. They will have debates on Iran war. And they will have essays on de-dollarization or BRICS or whatever. After 18 months, the best 200 students, Christian students from all over the country, they will be selected and they will be given 6 months of intense face-to-face. They're living together, playing together, fighting together, arguing together, and they're getting an intensive training on how to crack UPSC exam, how to qualify in the interviews. So out of 200, if 20 Christian students who have become community of prayer, if they crack, become the police officers, become deputy collectors, district magistrates, we can begin to do what William Carey was doing. We can begin to do what the Bible translators, missionaries were doing. Give godly civil servants to India. Now, thank you. So this is just one proposal. The government says that during the last 10 years, 93,000 schools have been closed in India. If a school had only 10 students, that's 9.3 lakhs. If the school had 100 students, that's 9 crore students. Why have these schools closed? Because parents no longer believe in public education. Teachers come, they don't come. They come, they don't teach. It's much better for the children to be chasing buffaloes and goats than to be sitting in the school. Does God want India to be a great nation? Can the church take up the challenge that if the government has closed down 93,000 schools, we will create 1 lakh schools? We don't have to hire teachers. These don't even have to be schools. These would be 5 families, 10 families, 20 families, creating an educational cooperative in a remote village in Rajasthan. They don't have to hire teachers because the best teachers are girls, and no parents are going to send their girls into remote villages. But you know what? If those kids in Rajasthan want to study physics, we will have a physics professor whose name is Albert Einstein. He will go into every village, in every church, and teach physics online. So our videographers, animation artists, they will have Shakespeare come into every village and teach Romeo and Juliet. They will have Isaac Newton. When they are studying Indian Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar will himself go and teach Constitution. He speaks Marathi and English, but he can teach in Hindi and Gujarati also, thanks to artificial intelligence. So the church In the 19th century, the Western missionaries came to educate us. Now, can the Indian church take the responsibility to make India a great nation by marrying church and technology to offer free and inexpensive education using the world's best teachers? If you're studying Mahatma Gandhi, let Mahatma Gandhi come himself and in a village teach in Telugu or in Tamil what his movement was all about, what he really believed. That's the education revolution. That's discussed in the third education revolution book. And hopefully, this year, July, August, September, we are hoping that we can do a national convention on Christian education um, in Chennai to create 1 lakh educational institutions. It doesn't have to be all education, all cooperatives. It could be homeschools, but we would like it to be church supported homeschooling movement, meaning parents are running a cooperative supported by the local churches, and we are supplying them curriculum, we are supplying them technology, and we are training teachers. So every village, if there is no one who is qualified to get a BA or BEd or MEd, they can at least get a diploma, online diploma. So to run 1 lakh educational cooperatives throughout India, we need to train at least 5 lakh teachers. If you're becoming a teacher, how much would you spend to get a BEd? 2 lakhs. 2 lakhs. We will give your children 2 years BEd for total of 10,000 rupees online. Well, no, we become very wealthy because 5 lakh students getting BEd, paying 10,000 is 500 crores. This is possible. We can finance the entire operation by giving 5 lakh people. We're not calling them teachers, we're calling them academic pastors. Because secularism has separated pastoral role and educational role. This is a modern problem because earlier you go to Madras Christian College, from 1838 to 1962, every single principal of Madras Christian College was an ordained minister. Dr. Chandran Devanesan, 1962, is the first. He was a good man, good theologian, but he was the first man who was not an ordained minister. So education was a ministry of the church. That's what a homeschooling mother does. A homeschooling mother is not just making sure that the child is getting all the mathematics and physics and chemistry and history and geography, but that the child is learning God's word, not just theoretically, but is in his behavior, her behavior. So the mother is playing a pastoral role along with academic role. And this is not a new concept. In Kerala, still, school is Pallikudam. That's building next to the church, under the supervision of the church. Throughout North India, this was the concept. An Anglican church had a parish school where the pastor was the master. In the villages, even the Presbyterians throughout North India, there was an office called pastor master. The village pastor was the village master. Every child went through pastors because there were no public schools back in the 1940s and 50s. So that is the idea of an academic pastor that is to be revived, that you have to not just give a lecture on physics, not just give a lecture on Shakespeare, you have to mold the belief, the mindset, the worldview, character of a student. Can India be reformed? This is why Jesus came into the world, and I'll close with this verse because I haven't read the Bible at all in this 1 hour or whatever of presentation. But why did Jesus come? In Matthew chapter 12, Matthew is quoting Isaiah, verse 18. Here is my servant whom I have chosen, the one I love, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed, a dalit, he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he has brought justice through to victory. In his name, India will put its hope. In his name, nations will put their hope. Can injustice in Indian society today, where on false charges a sitting chief minister can be thrown in jail, can this nation be transformed? In his name, nations will put their hope. There is no hope for India outside of Jesus Christ. But Jesus Christ wants to work through his church. So a revival, awakening of the Indian church, where the Indian church will discard American pessimism. That no, the last days are going to be terrible. No. The rivers of living water have to flow from your heart. Your heart is his throne. Jesus says, if you drink the water that he gives you, out of your heart, out of your belly will flow the rivers of living water. You have to become the tree of life. That's a long subject. I won't go into it. But let me stop here. Basically bringing the challenge that Jesus came to transform. He's making everything new. He wants to bring us out of our pessimism, escapism, resignation, to take up our cross, to disciple the nation, bring every sphere of life under the disciplined lordship of Jesus Christ. Thank you. Thank you.